I never imagined that being left out of my own son's family reunion could hurt so deeply. 1 week before the big event, I opened the invitation email and froze. My name wasn't on the list. Not only had my son, Matt, excluded me, but every other family member had been included. Shock, anger, and heartbreak collided inside me. I had supported Matt for decades, through school, heartbreaks, career struggles, and suddenly, I wasn't even family enough to be invited. As I continue, please subscribe, comment, like, and share this video. I sat at my kitchen table on a quiet Thursday morning in October, staring at the family reunion invitation that had arrived in my email inbox just 15 minutes earlier, reading it carefully 3 times before the full devastating reality finally sank in completely. Every relative I could think of was meticulously listed in the cheerful announcement: cousins I hadn't seen in years from distant states, great aunts from small towns across the Midwest, elderly uncles who rarely traveled anymore, and even family friends who had been adopted into our circle over the decades through marriages, shared experiences, and longtime friendships that had become indistinguishable from blood relationships. But my name was nowhere to be found on the comprehensive guest list, despite the fact that I had been the primary organizer and coordinator of family gatherings for the past 20 years. The reunion was being held at Riverside Park next Saturday afternoon, organized entirely by my son Matt and his wife Karen, and apparently I wasn't considered important enough to include in this celebration of our family heritage and multi-generational connections. The email was cheerful and detailed, describing carefully planned activities, specific potluck dish assignments for different family branches, and an elaborate group photo session designed to capture 3 generations of the Wilson family legacy, for posterity. Reading those particular words felt like a knife twisting slowly in my chest, because I represented the crucial connection between those generations, serving as the living bridge from my elderly parents' generation to my grandchildren's future while maintaining relationships and family knowledge that spanned decades of shared experiences, celebrations, and challenges that had shaped our family's identity and values. I had been the person maintaining family relationships for decades through consistent effort and genuine care, organizing holiday gatherings that brought scattered relatives together, keeping track of birthdays and anniversaries that might otherwise be forgotten, sending sympathy cards during difficult times and congratulation notes during celebrations, and ensuring that our extended family stayed meaningfully connected despite the geographical distances and natural differences that inevitably develop over time as people pursue different careers, lifestyles, and priorities. Now my own son had decided that I was expendable and unnecessary, that this important family reunion could proceed successfully without the person who had been its unofficial coordinator and emotional center for 2 decades. Looking back over the past few months with new understanding and growing hurt, I could see the warning signs that Matt and Karen had been planning something significant without including me in their discussions or decision-making processes. They had been making mysterious phone calls that would end abruptly and awkwardly when I entered the room where they were talking, having hushed conversations that seemed to involve detailed planning and coordination efforts, and asking seemingly casual questions about family contact information and historical relationships that should have been normal conversation topics rather than secretive intelligence-gathering missions. Karen had been particularly interested in learning about complicated family dynamics and past conflicts between different relatives, questions that I had answered honestly and comprehensively because I thought she was simply trying to understand her husband's family better and find ways to strengthen relationships with his relatives through more informed and sensitive communication. I had even helped her obtain current contact information for distant cousins and provided detailed historical background about family traditions, regional preferences, and individual personalities that would help her plan meaningful activities and facilitate comfortable conversations during any potential family gathering. What I hadn't realized at the time was that all of this carefully provided information was being systematically used to plan a major reunion that would deliberately exclude me while including everyone else whose relationships I had helped maintain and nurture over the years through consistent effort and genuine investment in family connections. The betrayal felt exponentially deeper because I had unknowingly and enthusiastically provided the tools, information, and relationship foundation that were being used to orchestrate my own exclusion from the family gathering I should have been central to organizing and attending. The worst part of discovering my exclusion wasn't just being left out of the planning and invitation process, but gradually realizing that dozens of family members had received this detailed invitation and apparently none of them had questioned my obvious absence or reached out to ask why I wasn't included in the planning committee or invitation list for such an important family event. This troubling silence suggested that either they didn't notice or care about my exclusion from something I should have been central to, or more disturbingly, that Matt and Karen had provided some plausible explanation for my absence that made it seem reasonable, justified, or even necessary to exclude me from this celebration of our shared family heritage and relationships. I began systematically calling various relatives to gauge their reactions and understand what story was being told about my conspicuous lack of involvement in the reunion planning process. What I discovered through these careful conversations was even more hurtful and manipulative than the initial exclusion itself. Matt and Karen had been proactively telling people that I was going through some serious health issues, and had specifically requested not to be involved in family gatherings while I focused on recovery and medical treatment. This completely fabricated story accomplished two sophisticated objectives simultaneously. It explained my absence in a way that generated sympathy rather than suspicion or questioning, and it painted me as someone who was voluntarily withdrawing from family relationships and responsibilities rather than being pushed out or deliberately excluded by them. The lie was particularly cruel and manipulative because it suggested that my supposed health problems and well-being were barriers to family connection rather than compelling reasons why family support and inclusion might be especially important and welcome during a difficult period. Several well-meaning relatives expressed genuine concern about my fabricated health problems and offered to visit or provide assistance with daily tasks, forcing me into the impossible position of either perpetuating Matt and Karen's lie about my condition or revealing the truth that my own son was spreading false information about me to justify excluding me from important family gatherings and celebrations. I made the difficult decision not to confront Matt directly about the reunion invitation and the lies he was telling family members about my supposed health problems, partly because I wanted to understand the full scope and implications of what was happening before creating a potentially explosive family conflict, and partly because I held onto a small hope that he might realize his mistake and reach out to include me before the event actually took place. Instead, I spent the week quietly preparing for multiple possible scenarios, including the likelihood that the reunion would proceed without me and planning how to respond to what would certainly be a very difficult and emotionally challenging situation for me personally and for our family relationships going forward. I methodically gathered old family photos that documented decades of shared experiences, updated contact information for relatives who might not have current details for reaching each other, and organized historical documents and family genealogy information that might be needed or requested during reunion activities and conversations. My reasoning was that even if I wasn't invited or welcome to attend the gathering myself, I could still contribute meaningfully to making the event successful and memorable for the family members who would be participating, because my ultimate priority was family harmony and connection rather than personal recognition or inclusion. I also began strategically reaching out to relatives I hadn't spoken with recently, ostensibly just to catch up on their lives and families but actually to maintain and strengthen those relationships independently of whatever narrative Matt and Karen were creating about my role in the family and my supposed withdrawal from family activities due to health concerns. Most importantly, I started developing comprehensive contingency plans for how to handle various scenarios that might arise during or after the reunion, ranging from simple logistics and communication issues to more complex family dynamics and relationship conflicts that might emerge when extended family members gathered together for the first time in several years. My extensive experience organizing family events over the past 2 decades had taught me that reunions were complicated undertakings that required detailed coordination, problem-solving skills, knowledge of family personalities and preferences, and the ability to handle unexpected crises with calm efficiency and diplomatic sensitivity. I strongly suspected that Matt and Karen, despite their apparent confidence and enthusiasm, might discover that they needed help and expertise that only someone with my experience and comprehensive knowledge of family relationships could provide effectively. By Thursday evening, 3 days before the scheduled reunion, I began receiving increasingly frequent phone calls from various relatives who had specific questions about logistics, directions, family history, dietary restrictions, and other important details that Matt and Karen apparently weren't able to answer adequately or with the level of specificity that people needed for their travel and preparation plans. My cousin Sandra called with urgent questions about dietary restrictions for several elderly relatives with serious medical conditions, information that was absolutely crucial for planning the potluck meal safely but that she couldn't get clear or reliable answers about from the official reunion organizers despite multiple attempts to reach them. My nephew David needed detailed directions to the park location and specific information about parking availability and accessibility options, details that should have been included in the original invitation but had been overlooked during the planning process. Most telling and concerning was a call from my Aunt Margaret, who wanted to bring an elaborate display of family photos and genealogy information that she had been working on for months, but she couldn't get responses to her questions about space availability and setup requirements for the activities that had been planned, nor could she get confirmation about whether such displays would be welcome or appropriate for the event. Each of these conversations revealed significant gaps in the planning and coordination efforts that were becoming increasingly obvious and problematic as the reunion date approached rapidly. I answered all of these questions helpfully and completely, providing detailed information and practical solutions despite not being invited to attend the event myself, because I genuinely wanted the reunion to be successful and memorable for the sake of the family members who were looking forward to it and had made travel arrangements to participate. However, I also began to understand more clearly that Matt and Karen had significantly underestimated the complexity and detailed coordination required for organizing a successful large family gathering, and were struggling to handle all of the logistical details and last-minute issues that inevitably arise when bringing together people from different generations, geographic locations, and varying levels of mobility and special needs. The pattern of calls suggested that they were overwhelmed by responsibilities they had assumed without fully understanding their scope and implications, and that they lacked both the experience and the comprehensive family knowledge necessary to resolve problems quickly and effectively. Friday evening, less than 24 hours before the reunion was scheduled to begin, I received the call that confirmed all of my suspicions about the challenges Matt and Karen were facing with their ambitious but inadequately planned event. My brother Tom called in complete panic because he had just learned that the pavilion reservation at Riverside Park had been canceled due to a scheduling conflict that the park administration had discovered during their routine review of weekend bookings, leaving the reunion without a central gathering location with only one day's notice before dozens of family members were scheduled to arrive from across several states. Matt had apparently made the reservation months earlier but had never followed up to confirm the details or check on potential problems until that Friday afternoon, when he discovered to his horror that the park had double-booked the facility and was giving priority to an event that had been planned and confirmed much earlier with proper documentation and deposits. Tom was calling me specifically because he knew from years of experience that I had extensive knowledge of event planning procedures and had successfully organized family gatherings at multiple venues over the past 2 decades, and he desperately hoped that I might have practical suggestions for alternative locations or creative solutions to this crisis that threatened to completely derail the reunion that people had been anticipating for months. I spent over an hour on the phone with Tom, systematically brainstorming viable options and providing specific contact information for alternative venues, backup catering services, and equipment rental companies that might be able to help save the reunion on such impossibly short notice. By the time we finished our detailed conversation, I had essentially developed a complete and comprehensive contingency plan for relocating and reorganizing the entire event from scratch, despite not being invited to attend it myself and having been deliberately excluded from all planning discussions. Tom was genuinely grateful for my extensive help and seemed surprised that I was willing to invest so much time and effort in solving complex problems for an event that I wasn't welcome at, but I explained that family relationships and successful celebrations were more important to me than personal slights or hurt feelings, and that I wanted the reunion to succeed for everyone's benefit regardless of how I had been treated by the organizers. Saturday morning arrived at 7 a.m. with my phone ringing persistently with increasingly frantic and desperate calls from Matt and Karen, who had apparently spent a sleepless night realizing that they were facing multiple cascading crises that they couldn't handle without help from someone who had actual experience organizing large family events successfully. The pavilion cancellation had triggered a cascade of additional problems that they hadn't anticipated. The catering company needed a new delivery address and setup information, elderly relatives needed updated directions and accessibility details, and the planned activities required different equipment and space arrangements than originally anticipated for the new venue. Karen was nearly in tears as she explained that they had spent months planning this reunion as a surprise demonstration of their ability to bring the family together successfully and create a memorable celebration, but everything was falling apart at the last minute and they didn't know who else to turn to for the expertise and problem-solving skills they desperately needed. Matt was more defensive and less emotional in his approach, suggesting somewhat unconvincingly that these were just minor logistical issues that any reasonably competent person could handle with sufficient effort and organization, but his increasingly desperate tone and rapid speech revealed that he was completely overwhelmed by the complexity and urgency of the problems they were facing. They asked tentatively if I could possibly provide advice and assistance with their planning crisis, apparently expecting me to drop everything and solve their problems immediately despite having been excluded from the event itself and having received no apology or acknowledgement of how they had treated me. I listened carefully to their requests and explanations, and then told them calmly that I would be happy to help save the reunion and ensure its success, but only if they were willing to acknowledge publicly that their initial planning had been inadequate and unrealistic, and that they needed to approach family relationships with more humility and genuine respect for the contributions that different family members could make based on their experience and knowledge. After Matt and Karen somewhat reluctantly agreed to my reasonable conditions, I spent the next 4 intensive hours completely reorganizing their family reunion from the ground up, utilizing professional contacts and community resources that I had developed and maintained over years of successful event planning and family celebration coordination. I secured an excellent new venue at the community center where I had organized numerous previous family gatherings, leveraging my positive relationship with the staff and my track record of successful events to obtain space that was actually superior to the original park pavilion. I arranged comprehensive backup catering through a service that owed me personal favors from past collaborations and was willing to accommodate our last-minute needs, and I coordinated specialized transportation and accessibility accommodations for elderly relatives who needed special assistance to participate fully in the celebration. I also took complete responsibility for coordinating all activities and logistics that Matt and Karen had been struggling to manage effectively, drawing on my extensive knowledge of family relationships, individual preferences, and group dynamics to create a program that would be meaningful and enjoyable for all attendees regardless of their age or interests. By noon, I had successfully transformed what had been heading toward a complete disaster into a well-organized and thoughtfully planned celebration that would exceed the original plans in terms of both logistical efficiency and family engagement and satisfaction. However, I made it absolutely clear to Matt and Karen that my extensive assistance came with non-negotiable expectations. They would need to acknowledge my contributions publicly and demonstrate genuine appreciation for the family relationships and expertise that they had initially dismissed as unnecessary or outdated. The reunion itself turned out to be a remarkable success that exceeded everyone's expectations, bringing together over 40 family members for a day of celebration, storytelling, and meaningful connection that created lasting memories and strengthened relationships across multiple generations. The community center venue provided significantly better facilities than the original park pavilion would have offered, including climate control, better lighting, accessible restrooms, and flexible space arrangements that accommodated different group activities simultaneously. The catering arrangements I had secured were superior to what had been initially planned, featuring a diverse menu that accommodated various dietary restrictions and preferences while highlighting regional specialties that held special meaning for different branches of our family. Most importantly, the activities I had organized drew extensively on decades of accumulated family history and relationship knowledge to create meaningful experiences for attendees of all ages, from elderly relatives sharing stories about previous generations to young children learning about family traditions and connections for the first time. I found myself naturally and inevitably taking the primary leadership role in facilitating conversations, organizing group photos that captured the full scope of family relationships, and ensuring that elderly relatives were comfortable and included in all activities rather than marginalized or overlooked. Multiple family members commented enthusiastically on the excellent organization and thoughtful planning that had made the reunion so successful and memorable, and several people specifically thanked me for my obvious contributions to making the event special and meaningful for everyone who attended. Matt and Karen watched these interactions with growing awareness and apparent embarrassment about how much specialized knowledge, experience, and effort had been required to create the successful gathering they were hosting, and they gradually began to understand why their initial planning efforts had been inadequate and why my expertise and family relationship knowledge were valuable assets rather than unwelcome interference or outdated approaches to family coordination. The stark contrast between the crisis they had faced early that morning and the successful celebration they were enjoying in the afternoon provided a powerful and undeniable lesson about the importance of recognizing and utilizing the strengths that different family members bring to collective endeavors based on their experience and knowledge. During the reunion, I had numerous opportunities to reconnect with relatives I hadn't seen in years and to share stories and memories that strengthened relationships across multiple generations of our extended family. The genealogy display that my Aunt Margaret brought sparked fascinating conversations about family history and connections that many younger relatives had never heard before, and I found myself serving as the primary source of information about relationships, dates, important events, and family stories that brought our collective past to life for people who had only known fragments of the larger narrative. The group photo session that Karen had originally planned became a multi-generational celebration of family continuity and connection, with me naturally positioned as one of the central figures linking different branches and generations of our family tree through my knowledge of relationships and my role in maintaining connections over time. Children who had never met their great-aunts and great-uncles were delighted to discover new relatives and hear stories about family adventures and traditions that had shaped their parents' and grandparents' lives in ways they had never understood before. The success of these interactions reinforced my understanding of my crucial role as a family historian and relationship coordinator, responsibilities that I had been fulfilling effectively for years but that Matt and Karen had initially dismissed as unimportant or outdated in contemporary family life. Watching family members connect and reconnect through conversations and activities that I had facilitated reminded everyone present of the significant value that experienced family members bring to maintaining relationships and preserving traditions across time and geographical distance. As the reunion wound down in the late afternoon, several family members approached me privately to express their confusion about why I hadn't been included in the initial planning process and to thank me sincerely for stepping in to save what could have been a complete disaster that would have disappointed dozens of people who had made significant travel arrangements and had high expectations for the celebration. My cousin Sandra mentioned that she had been genuinely surprised not to see my name on the invitation list, given my well-known history of organizing successful family events, and she had wondered if there was some family conflict or health issue that she wasn't aware of that might explain my exclusion. My nephew David said that he had automatically assumed I was working behind the scenes to coordinate the reunion, as I had done with previous family gatherings over the years, and had been shocked to learn that morning about the planning crisis that had nearly derailed the entire event. These conversations revealed that family members had indeed noticed my exclusion from the planning process but had assumed there were reasonable explanations rather than questioning the decision directly with Matt and Karen or investigating the situation more thoroughly. Several relatives expressed sincere appreciation for my willingness to step in and save the reunion despite having been initially excluded from the planning and decision-making process, and they made it clear that they expected me to be centrally involved in planning any future family gatherings based on this demonstration of my essential role in successful family celebrations. The support and recognition from extended family members provided important validation for my contributions and served as a gentle but clear message to Matt and Karen about the importance of including experienced family members in significant decisions and celebrations rather than assuming that enthusiasm and good intentions could substitute for knowledge and expertise. In the weeks following the reunion, Matt and Karen gradually and somewhat reluctantly acknowledged the serious mistakes they had made in excluding me from their planning process and failing to recognize the complexity of organizing successful family gatherings that meet diverse needs and expectations. They admitted that their desire to demonstrate their independence and capability had led them to dismiss valuable resources and expertise that could have prevented the crisis they had faced and made the entire process much more manageable and successful. Karen was particularly reflective about her role in encouraging Matt to distance himself from what she had perceived as my controlling tendencies and outdated approaches, acknowledging that she had misinterpreted my experience and knowledge as attempts to interfere with their autonomy rather than genuine offers of helpful support and guidance based on proven success. Matt struggled more significantly with admitting his errors and accepting responsibility for the problems his decisions had created, but he eventually recognized that his pride and insecurity about being seen as dependent on his mother had nearly ruined an important family celebration and damaged relationships with relatives who had been looking forward to the reunion for months. They both expressed gratitude for my willingness to help save the event despite their initial treatment of me, and they committed to approaching future family decisions and events with more humility and genuine appreciation for the contributions that different family members could make based on their experience and specialized knowledge. However, rebuilding trust and repairing the relationship damage caused by their exclusion and deception would require considerable time and consistent demonstration of changed attitudes and behavior rather than just verbal acknowledgments and promises. 6 months later, when Matt and Karen began planning their daughter's high school graduation celebration, they approached me early in the planning process to ask for advice and assistance with organizing a meaningful event that would bring family together to honor their daughter's achievements while avoiding the mistakes and crises they had experienced with the reunion. The contrast with their reunion planning approach was remarkable and encouraging. Instead of excluding me and struggling alone with inadequate knowledge and experience, they actively sought my input and expertise while maintaining appropriate boundaries around their decision-making authority as parents and primary hosts. I was happy to share my knowledge and experience while allowing them to maintain ownership of the planning process and make final decisions about the event, and the result was a successful celebration that honored their daughter while strengthening family relationships rather than creating conflict and disappointment. The graduation party became an important opportunity to demonstrate how family members with different strengths and perspectives could work together effectively when mutual respect and clear communication guided their collaboration rather than pride and insecurity. Matt and Karen had learned to value my contributions without feeling threatened by my experience, while I had learned to offer support and guidance without overwhelming their decision-making processes or taking over their responsibilities as parents and hosts. The successful collaboration on the graduation celebration proved that our family relationships had been strengthened rather than weakened by working through the conflicts and misunderstandings that had led to the reunion crisis and its eventual resolution. 2 years after the reunion incident, our family had successfully established new traditions and patterns for planning celebrations and maintaining relationships that drew effectively on everyone's strengths while respecting individual autonomy and decision-making authority within appropriate roles. Matt and Karen had become confident and capable event organizers who regularly sought advice and assistance from experienced family members without feeling diminished or controlled by accepting help from others who had relevant knowledge and skills. I had found productive ways to share my knowledge and resources generously while allowing younger family members to take leadership roles and learn from their own experiences, both successful and unsuccessful. Most importantly, our family had developed a healthy culture of open communication about expectations, contributions, and decision-making processes that prevented the kind of misunderstandings and exclusions that had nearly derailed the reunion and damaged important family relationships. The crisis that had begun with my deliberate exclusion from reunion planning had ultimately led to stronger, more honest, and more collaborative family relationships that served everyone's needs better than the previous informal arrangements where roles and responsibilities had been assumed rather than discussed openly and agreed upon explicitly. 5 years later, I was honored to be asked to speak at my granddaughter's wedding about the importance of family relationships and the valuable lessons that multiple generations could learn from each other's experiences and perspectives when they approached differences with respect and openness. The speech provided a meaningful opportunity to reflect on how the reunion crisis had taught our family important lessons about pride, collaboration, and the critical importance of recognizing and utilizing the strengths that different family members bring to collective endeavors. I talked about how exclusion and isolation weaken families while inclusion and collaboration strengthen them in ways that benefit everyone, and how the willingness to admit mistakes and learn from others is essential for maintaining healthy relationships across generations with different backgrounds and perspectives. The wedding celebration itself was a beautiful testament to how much our family dynamics had improved since the reunion crisis, Multiple generations worked together seamlessly to create a beautiful and meaningful celebration that honored the couple while strengthening bonds between all family members present. Matt and Karen had become respected leaders in planning and organizing family events, but they had learned to value and incorporate the wisdom and experience of older relatives while maintaining their own autonomy and decision-making authority as appropriate to their roles and responsibilities. 10 years after the reunion incident, our family had grown to include new marriages, births, and relationships that had been nurtured and celebrated through countless gatherings and celebrations that drew directly on the lessons learned during that transformative period of crisis and recovery. The planning and coordination skills that Matt and Karen had developed, combined with the experience and historical knowledge that I had shared, had created a family culture that was capable of adapting to changing circumstances while maintaining core values and traditions that connected past, present, and future generations in meaningful ways. New family members were consistently welcomed and integrated through celebrations and activities that honored both their individual contributions and their connections to the larger family story and heritage. Children who had been toddlers during the reunion crisis had grown into teenagers who understood clearly the importance of family relationships and were already beginning to contribute their own ideas and energy to maintaining family connections and planning successful celebrations. 20 years after the reunion crisis, Matt and Karen's children had grown into adults who had inherited both the planning skills their parents had developed through experience and the appreciation for family history and relationships that I had shared with multiple generations through consistent effort and genuine care. They were organizing their own family events and gatherings, drawing thoughtfully on lessons learned from both the mistakes and successes of previous generations while adapting traditional approaches to contemporary needs and circumstances. The family photo albums from reunions and celebrations over the past 2 decades told the complete story of a family that had learned to work together effectively while honoring individual contributions and maintaining respect for different perspectives and approaches to family relationships and responsibilities. Matt had become a skilled family event organizer who regularly sought advice from experienced relatives while maintaining confidence in his own abilities and judgment. Karen had developed genuine expertise in managing complex logistics and coordinating activities that brought together family members of all ages and interests in meaningful ways. Most importantly, their children had grown up understanding that family relationships require active maintenance and consistent effort, and that successful celebrations depend on collaboration, communication, and willingness to learn from others' experience and knowledge rather than assuming that good intentions alone are sufficient for success. Today, 25 years after that nearly disastrous reunion, as our family prepared to celebrate the silver anniversary of what had become an annual tradition, I reflected on how the crisis had ultimately strengthened every aspect of our family relationships and created a legacy of collaboration that would continue to benefit future generations. The community center that had served as our emergency venue had become our preferred location for large family gatherings, and the catering service that had saved our first reunion had become our reliable partner for special celebrations and milestone events. More importantly, the fundamental lessons learned during that crisis had been passed down through multiple generations and had influenced how our family approached challenges and opportunities in many areas of life beyond event planning. The willingness to admit mistakes, the importance of asking for help when needed, and the value of including experienced family members in decision-making processes had become core principles that guided our family's approach to everything from career decisions to parenting challenges to major life transitions. The reunion that had once represented the possibility of permanent family division had become an annual celebration that honored not just our family connections but our collective ability to learn from difficulties and create stronger relationships through honest communication and mutual support that transcended generational differences and individual pride. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, share this video, and activate the notification bell for more interesting stories.